Let's get started.
Sounds great.
So, hello everybody, thanks for joining. This session is going to be about data visualization in Excel. Now, we all know how awesome tool Excel is, and there's so many different things you can do in Excel, like creating, spreadsheets, different lists. You can create all kinds of different calculations using formulas and functions. You can filter, sort, summarize the data in so many different ways. Then we have, for example, macros, which can be great for any kinds of automatization. Additionally, you can also perform all kinds of different statistical analysis. And in terms of BI, you can do a lot of things. So, for example, you can import and connect many different data sources. You can use Excel extensions like, for example, Power Query for cleaning, and organizing your data. Then you can use Power Pivot for setting up data model, and then you can use DAX for creating really powerful measures. And then finally, you can use pivot tables in order to analyze all of that data. And of course, you can also do data visualizations in Excel. Now, speaking of data visualization, I would define it as the process of creating visual representation of data and information, typically in the form of tables, charts, maps, different shapes, and so on. And why exactly is this important? Well, simply because we humans are so much better at processing visual information rather just text and numbers. And because of that, data visualization can be super powerful for discovering patterns, trends, outliers, and so on. And now, even though Excel supports different visualization options, we at Zebra BI believe that there is still like a room for improvement in the sense of providing Excel users basically a tool that will enable them to create the so-called actionable reports and dashboards. And to simplify, actionable reporting is all about presenting data in intuitive ways so that users can get from informations to insights in a faster way and basically make better business decisions, which is like, I think, the whole point of reporting and data visualization. Now, agenda for today. So first, we will have a look at history and current options of data visualization in Excel. Next, we will build a dashboard with Zebra BI visuals and show some Excel tricks along the way. And at the end, we will have a look at a few different reports examples. Now, I'm super happy I won't be doing this session alone today. So my, let's say, partner in crime for today is Bill Jelen, aka Mr. Excel. Bill, hello, and thank you for taking the time and joining us.
Absolutely.
How are you doing?
Yeah, Tine. I'm really glad to be here, especially to talk about the history, like how we got to where we are now, and then just to see how much more amazing Zebra BI is with this new tool for Excel. So I'm gonna take us back and just look at the evolution of charting and data visualizations over time. So is it okay I'm going to share my screen? Is that all right?
Yeah, perfect, Bill. Just take over and take us on the right. And
all right.
I'm very much looking forward.
So we're going to go all the way back to the beginning, the very beginning, 1979, VisiCalc.
No.
Let's see. Can you see my screen now? Is it up?
Yeah. Are you sharing the same page as I do? Oh, no, I think it's still my screen.
Oh, no, yeah. Huh. Let's see. Shares. Actually, yeah, no, I'm seeing my screen. Like look over in G2. Is there not even a repeat function note there?
No. So let me stop sharing. Oh, perfect. Now I see. And maybe one more thing, Bill, can you also set like a full screen share so that the audience will see full content of the page? Okay, perfect. Now it's visible, I see.
Good. Okay, so let's go all the way back to the very beginning, which was VisiCalc, the very first spreadsheet. And I actually went back to the VisiCalc documentation this morning to see if they even had the REPT function, the repeat function, which is the cheap and dirty way of building bar charts before there were bar charts. But no, there was no repeat function. There were 21 functions in VisiCalc and nothing like the repeat functions. You couldn't even build these weird incel bar charts, right? The first place where we actually have charting coming is in 1983 when Lotus Development released Lotus 123. people don't realize the 1, 2, 3 was spreadsheet, database, and graphing. So the 3 in Lotus 1, 2, 3 is graphing. Of course, it was all monochrome. Every chart was on its own sheet. We're going to fast forward to Microsoft Excel came in and started adding more and more charts until we got to the famous 73 charts. For the longest time, we were just stuck with the same 73 charts. The new version of Excel would come out, and I'd come in and see what they gave us in charts, and it would just be the same 73 charts over and over and over again. There was just nothing new. And that 73 number even included charts that you should never use, like the pyramid chart and the cone charts, which have been kind of banished. It's really hard to find those today, thankfully, because they were misleading charts. I appreciate the 73 charts, but the fact that nothing changed after those 73 charts, that was a huge problem. Okay, so here's what we have in 2007. That's when we get the new ribbon, right? And hidden on the home tab are several items under conditional formatting, right? So if you never use conditional formatting, you would never even discover that they had added these 3 functions. And this is, unfortunately, classic Microsoft. We're going to give you really new, powerful things, and we're going to do that in a way that you'll never be able to discover it accidentally, right? So here I have a report. And again, Tine, as you said, it's just numbers. Like no one can figure out which line was the best or the worst. These are reject rates, so high numbers are bad. But using color scales, I can just come in. So conditional formatting color scales and choose that. And now I can instantly get a picture that line 2 started out the day really bad and kind of improved. Line 3 started out sort of bad and got worse as the day went on. Even line 1, who was the best, started at the end of the day to kind of, just fall off there. And then conditional formatting, data bars. Data bars, these are the cool little in-cell bar charts, right? Allow you to see the largest numbers very quickly. And then the third thing they gave us that year was icon sets. So under conditional formatting, icon sets. I remember there was actually an add-in back in 1998 or 1997 that lets you do the traffic lights, but you shouldn't choose this because for someone who's colorblind, the green and red will look the same. So you want to use the 3 symbols or, at least something that has different shapes. And my hot tip for this, to make this work, like that 94 and that green check mark are too far apart. I can't center my numbers. That just seems wrong. But next to right align is something, increased indent will kind of move the number closer to the icon. All right. So that's where we were in Excel 2007. In Excel 2010, we got something new called spark lines. Spark lines. So you have all these little trends and you want to show those graphically. So insert spark line and you choose where they're going to go. And you get a little line chart right in each cell. And if you make the cell larger, the chart gets larger. I also change the row height here. We'll double the row height. And so this is good. The default spark line, though, I always change this. I always say I want to see the high point, the low point, and each marker. The markers allow me to count backwards. So we peaked here 4 periods from the end. And then also on the spark line tools, you can change the colors. So for the markers, I make them a nice light gray. And then the high point, I'll change to be something like orange, like it's on fire. And for the low point, maybe a blue, it's cold or something like that. So, those are
jump in real quick, Bill, here. Spark lines are, really interesting because they do offer you, to provide context in the sense of showing, for example, trends, what is going on with your data. So it's for sure an interesting option. One advice I would have here is to always try to apply, and I think it's under settings, under axis. If you click on the spark lines, I believe it's under axis. So to kind of enforce, minimum and maximum of your vertical axis. Because if you don't do that, then everything will look up and down. Even if it's really flat, it will still look, really bumpy. So that can be misleading in a way. But if you apply that, now you have the right presentation of the data, which I think makes a lot of sense. So my advice here would be, if you're using spark lines, for sure, incorporate this feature, because this is the only way to ensure the correct full representation of the data.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one because, like you say, otherwise it scales to the size in the data, right? Yep, that's good. All right, 2013. There's the competing product Tableau, who came out with this awesome animated map chart, and Microsoft matched them, originally calling it Power Maps, and then later 3D maps. And these are just an amazing way to look at, basically put a pivot table on a map. You have the different colors, different heights. You can zoom over time, through time. And I love the 3D map charts. That was a great feature, but unfortunately, it's only in Windows. The team that built it is no longer supporting it. So we won't get any improvements to that. And then we're up to 2016. 2016, the thing we got in 2016 is these 3 new icons that appear to the right-hand side of the chart, which kind of makes it easier, maybe, to find certain chart elements if you want to add various items. Maybe they're here, but I still find, like, if I wanted data labels, the choices available to me are not really the choices that I need. I always end up going out to more options, which is just a shortcut to open the charting task pane over here on the right-hand side. So I don't want to deride the plus. At least it lets us discover that there are things in case people don't know to look up in chart design. The paintbrush lets you change colors, although the colors are fairly hideous, what they have here. And then the one that I actually like is filter. And I don't have the example today, but if you had 12 months going across January through December, but every 3 months there was an extra column with quarters, well, those quarters spike up and it looks horrible. And you can use the chart filter to remove the quarters without having to rearrange your data. So of those 3 icons, I like the funnel icon, the filter icon, the best, right? So, I mean, look at that, from 1997 up to 2016, really no new chart types were added. And then in 2016, they said, all right, we're going to create a brand new charting engine called the Ivy chart engine. And they came out with, I think, six types: the tree map, the sunburst, the histogram, box and whisker. I get it. The people who are doing box and whisker, they're statistical people. I've never had a great one in my life. Yeah. But the one that I really loved here, this is my editorial comments, that, like, what do you do with a tree map and sunburst? They're just horrible. I get histograms are good. But the waterfall chart is one that I used to have to create, and it was so hard to create. So the fact that they built waterfall charts in, that was just beautiful, right, to me. And I love the Zebra BI that lets us create waterfalls as well, already appropriately colored. These were never colored appropriately, and it took me more than a year to figure out how to change the colors in the Ivy charts. You have to double click on the chart legend, I learned from John Peltier. And then, so, I'm writing books, right? So I wrote a book about these new chart types, or included these new chart types in the Excel 2016 book. And I may be exaggerating when I'm saying it was Excel 2016 plus 1 week, but it wasn't long after the book that came out and they added funnel charts. And this was the first salvo from Microsoft saying, if you're not on Office 365, which is today Microsoft 365, you're not going to get the latest features. I mean, hey, look, a week after 2016 shipped, we gave you funnel charts. Now, I'm not a funnel chart person, but if you needed funnel charts, well, hey, now you just bought Excel 2016, you're going to go buy Office 365. And then, the Ivy chart, the idea to change everything to Ivy charts kind of was lost after 2017. And since then, the only thing that we've gotten new is back here, the filled map charts, which are cool. You can, do all the countries in Europe or something like that, right? And so, that's it. That's what's new in charting for Excel. So let's go back to your example and see what you've added.
Thanks for sharing the insights. I posted a comment in the chat section that you started even before I was born. So for me, it was super interesting to see what was going on way back in the past. Maybe just a quick question: and I agree, maps that you are showing right now, this can be great addition to data visualization. By the way, Bill, are you up for a challenge? If you can pinpoint Slovenia, which is the country from where Zebra BI is coming from, I'll buy you a lunch.
That's hilarious.
I give you like 5 seconds if you can maybe find Slovenia on this map.
It's somewhere on the screen, isn't it?
Yeah, it's somewhere on the screen, but it's very tiny.
Here, I'm just going to guess here, one of these. I don't know.
You're close, a little bit north, and somewhere, between Austria and Italy. Nevertheless, thanks a lot for all those inputs. And just to comment on what you mentioned, maybe the challenge is not even to create something completely new, but maybe do existing charts in a way that they can really present information in an impactful way. So hopefully, yeah, now you see my screen again. And so a couple of tips I would have for all of you, those creating the charts. I mean, for sure, I would advise you not to use any kinds of 3D charts because these ones are actually not useful. They actually present information in the wrong way. So for sure, go with 2D charts. They are much more, I would say, powerful. And yeah, to your point, Bill, some charts, you mentioned tree maps and sunburst. I do strongly believe that there are better ways how to present information, especially, again, going back to the human brains. We are much better at understanding, the length of the bar rather than area shapes on the charts. I don't know why that's the case, but for sure, tree maps are much harder to understand, especially in performance reporting and things like that. And I fully agree with you. There are a couple of good improvements. Waterfall chart, I think this is a chart that makes a lot of sense. It's super powerful. So great to see that Microsoft added this one as well. I will also show you a couple of tricks you can do with ZebraBI waterfall chart. But yeah, I fully agree. Now, funnel chart, this one can be interesting as well, especially if you're doing, I don't know, some kind of a pipeline analysis or things like that. That's a great option. To be honest, this one I would not recommend. Surface radar chart, I guess in some particular cases this one makes sense. To be honest, I haven't used it that much. I saw some examples, especially maybe in some market research related data visualizations. One that I really do love to use is scatter plot. So this one I think it's super powerful, especially if you want to show some kind of a correlation or maybe also incorporate bubbles if you have the third let's say variable. But yeah, I mean, altogether, this is what we have with data visualization at the moment. And now in the second part of this session, I guess the idea is that we try to build a dashboard where we would demonstrate some of the benefits of using ZebraBI visuals in order to achieve the so-called actionable reporting. As I mentioned before, actionable reporting is all about getting insights presented in a way that they are easy to understand for the end user, so that you don't have to pay too much attention to what is going on with your data, but you immediately see, where are the problems, where are the positive or negative developments, outliers, and things like that. So yeah, let's try to build something and demonstrate how this works. So for today, we created a sample data set. What we have here is a basic table, and we just used all of you Excel influencer kind of as a material for our challenge today. So we have a simple table with a couple of columns. So we have a channel. So here we have LinkedIn and YouTube. Then we have some months, and then we have the presenters. So here we have all the Excel influencers. I mean, not all, but let's say a handful of you. And then we added some actual data, which are actually views either on YouTube or on LinkedIn. And then we also added a plan data. And let me just explain why we decided to do that. So when you're presenting information, it's really important to compare them to something. So, comparing your actuals to any kinds of comparison measures, either plan or previous year, forecast, previous month, whatever, rolling averages, this will immediately provide much better understanding what is going on with your data. And that's why we put this kind of in the center of our product. By the way, Bill, do you have a plan for, I don't know, numbers of views on YouTube?
Yeah, that's funny. I would always show last year versus this year because that's data that we always have.
Yeah.
As long as you've been around for 2 years. I don't think I actually forecast the number of views.
No, but even the previous year comparison makes a lot of sense because you don't have plan data for every single KPI or for every single dimension. But as you mentioned, you do have data history, and why not use it in order to get better insights? So what I'm going to do next is just create a simple pivot table out of this one. I'm just going to go on the pivot table and insert pivot. And I'm going to do that on already existing sheet where is actually the place where we want to build the dashboard. And I have all my data here. For this particular one, I'm just going to add presenters in my rows placeholder, and I'm going to add actuals and plan to my values. Now we have a
we should point out, Tine, this is all fake data, right? This is not real data.
Yeah. So, very good point. Before we continue, and thanks for letting us know. Absolutely, this is completely random data. Hopefully, nobody will get offended or anything like that. But actually, since you mentioned, we used a simple function called rand between. I don't know if you are using this one, but essentially, what I can do is just simply enter this formula and then select the bottom value. Let's go with, I don't know, maybe 500. And then second input would be the top value. Let's go with 1500. Let's close the function, press enter, and now I get a random number between those minimum and maximum value. And if I expand this down, I will get random numbers. So this is how we generated the data for our case. And thanks for explaining this build. I almost forgot. Now back to the report. What we have now is a pivot table, and in a lot of cases, this is all the Excel users create. You have a table, you have some data. Why bother to push it further? And even though this for sure is useful to some extent, let me try to demonstrate how this can be much more powerful in the sense of how to visualize the data. So Bill, what we're going to do next is actually insert the first Zebra BI visual. I'm just going to select pivot table and where I'm going to go under insert and select Zebra BI table for Office. Now, by the way, you can simply import Zebra BI visuals from Microsoft App Source. You can actually use it free of charge. So if you want to try it out on your own, I kindly invite you to insert the visuals and do different things, maybe something similar to what me and Bill are going to do right now. But let's maybe resize this and have a quick look at what we have here. Okay, so now we have visual presentation of our data. We can see, for example, in this column, which presenters generated the largest amount of views. So we have Oz on top, we have Leila on the second place. I guess, okay, Bill, we have you on the third place. I guess even rand between kind of incorporates the actual views, since we have all three of you at the top. But what is even more important here, that Zebra BI Visual automatically generated also variance between plan and actual data. And if I now look at the second column, I can immediately see where the performance is kind of below or above the plan, which is really important because you want to understand who is doing good, who is doing bad, by how much in terms of absolute numbers or percentages. And this is calculated out of the box automatically.
So I'm always amazed here. How did you know that PL was plan and AC was actual? Are those programmed in? Like you didn't have to specify which is which.
Okay, so this is actually a good point. And to be completely honest, at the moment, this is not yet working to full extent because at the moment we have PY, which I guess would be previous year. And it was kind of automatically assigned to previous year. We actually do need to put it in the second column, okay? And now it will have plan abbreviation in that column. But to your point, yeah, it would be great if this would be seamless, and we are actually working on that. So, that we would put all the different options for, let's say, plan, like PL, budget maybe, plan, and things like that, and then the visual will automatically recognize and put it in the appropriate placeholder. So this one, I guess, will be supported in the near future. But yeah, good point. I fully agree. If this is automatical, then even better. And maybe let's just slightly customize this table. I'm going to do a couple of simple things. So I'm just going to go into the settings, which you can access in the top right corner. I'm going to reduce the number of I'm going to increase the number of our grid lines so that we will have a grid line for every single row. And I will make text size a bit bigger so that it's easier to read. Maybe let's also change the title of the chart. So let's go performance by presenter. Let's make it a bit bigger. And yeah, there's our table. So we just did a couple of clicks. And now we have, I would say, solid understanding of how influencers are performing. Now, typically on the dashboards, you also want to include maybe some trends analysis. So let's add charts as well. And for that, what I'm going to do, I see I already have something here. I'm just going to copy paste the table and prepare something for trends as well. So I'm just going to replace the presenter dimension with months. Again, now I have a pivot table with my months in my rows and actual and planned data. Now, what I could do next is, again, build a chart. But maybe in this case, let's go with the second option, which would be a standalone table, because we will then add a certain feature that I know you will really love, and these are the comments. So maybe you can just help me out how to do this one. But essentially, what I want to do is create a table below where I would kind of extract all the data from pivot table.
Okay, right. So, yeah, so you're trying to make just a regular range, not a pivot table, so that way you can add an extra column.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah,
that's correct.
Right. So, there's two things that can happen here. One, you can either embrace get pivot data, which is just equal sign, go click on a cell, and it'll build that get pivot data for you. Or you can just, unfortunately, I usually cheat and just go equal T7 or something like that to prevent the get pivot data from happening. With get pivot data, you have to change the reference type so many times, and so that formula you just built there, that's a great easy formula.
Yeah, true. And let's maybe combine both. So what I did here is a simple Excel linking. So I just basically do an equal sign and then get the values from the table. Now, what I want to do next is also bring my actual data and my plan. And for that, as you mentioned, Bill, I'm going to go with get pivot data. This one, I think it's really cool, especially if you want to kind of automate things in your reports, so that you don't have to worry if, for example, a certain rows are inserted or something gets renamed and things like that. It does give you, it does gives you additional flexibility when designing the data. So at the moment, this looks exactly the same as this data right here. But if I look closely to my formula, I can see some static elements. So we have the months field, and this is then the item. So it's January in the quote marks. And I want to make this cell dynamical. So I'm just gonna erase it for now. And instead of that, I'm just gonna put a cell as an input. Okay.
That's the key. If you don't make that change, that get pivot data as you copy down is going to always point to January.
Exactly.
And without changing that one parameter or the argument to point to a cell, it's just going to be terrible. All right.
Yeah, so it's just going to be, as you mentioned, exactly the same data. Of course, we don't want that. We want to have then February, March, April data, and so on. So the last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lock this by my row. So at the moment, now this cell is fully locked. Now it is logged by rows, and now it is logged by columns. And
there you go. Yeah.
To your point, Bill, now I'm just gonna extend the formula to the bottom. And what I have here is now exactly the same data as in this column. Okay, so this is kind of the magic of get pivot data. And what I can do next is just simply copy paste it to plan, because I locked the cell by a column. This one remains in this one. But at the moment, it still shows me exactly the same data as for AC. And now if I go back to the formula, now I could make this one dynamical as well. Maybe what I'm going to do here is just replace AC with PL. And again, now we have the actual data for plan. I'm going to expand it down, and now I have the plan data in my table as well. So this is kind of a basic trick that you can do, and there's a lot of different things. You could, for example, also include like maybe some named cells. For example, you could have drop-down selection in a certain cell, and the value that you would select there would then be just incorporated in get pivot data. Maybe to switch between plan or a forecast, that could be like a cool option. But in any case, now we have the table. And so when designing Zebra BI visuals, you have three options how to prepare the data. You can go with name range, which is what we have right here. You can go with pivot tables, and you can also go with Excel tables. Now, let me explain why maybe this option makes more sense here. So I'm just going to press Control T and create a table. I think I have already a format predefined, so let's switch to this. And Excel table provides a cool feature in the sense, if I add a certain data, like additional column, this will automatically be added on the visual. So now we have also the comment column in place, and let's insert the Zebra BI chart. So again, I'm just going to go under add-ins and select the Zebra BI charts for this one. Now, again, with a couple of clicks, we already have really powerful charts. So you mentioned you love waterfall charts. Bill, this one hopefully is up to the standards. And let's maybe resize it a bit. And going back to the report, now we have the table, we have the chart. Let's resize it and maybe increase the font size a bit.
Right. So look at that. I mean, we were way over plan in February, but then in March fell off. Like the highest month there in February at plus 18%, and then fell off to minus 11% in March. It makes me want to dive into that data and see exactly what's going on. Like there's some big problem that happened between February and March, and then I have to remind myself this is random data, and I should just relax. But,
Very good point. But if you would be running a business, this is exactly the question that you would ask yourself: what is going on there? Why do we have like a huge red chunk? What do we need to do in order to improve it?
I'm going to jump in here, right? Before I was Mr. Excel, I worked for 12 years as a financial analyst for the same company. And, so you're producing charts and you're giving that chart to your manager, who's going to give the chart to the manager's manager. This is, long before we're trying to get LinkedIn likes or Facebook likes. You're trying to get that vice president above you to pay attention, to realize that you're there and that you add value and maybe promote you someday. And so I never would give them just a chart. I would always try and look at that chart, figure out the most one or two important things, and add a note to the chart, even a sticky note that says, hey, check this out. That little 30-second takeaway, right? That way, the vice president, when he then is in, the board meeting or the sales meeting, he'll be able to say, oh yeah, we had this weird thing happen in February, or here's why March was way down, right? So I'd always look for the one or two key indicators and try and add that to the chart. And for me, literally a sticky note, it wasn't really part of the chart, or maybe I draw it on the chart or something like that. But wow, check out what we can do here with Zebra BI. This is so much better.
Okay, perfect. So let's do just that. And to your point, yeah, you're absolutely correct, because senior executives, CEOs, they never have enough time. They need to look at the report and have their questions answered in basically in a few seconds, or let's say a few minutes. But in any case, it's really important to provide visualization that will enable them to do just that, get answers to their questions really quickly. So comments, as you mentioned, are a great way how to do that. Now, before we add a comment, maybe just one final explanation. Between the visuals, you can actually switch between different predefined charts. Okay, so this is super easy. You just basically click on the button and you will have predefined charts in the background. So maybe this one makes the most sense because we can see the actual data and the planned data. By the way, let's just switch this one to planned placeholder. And then you have additional data points, data series, where I can see what is comparison to plan. And I can immediately see, as Bill mentioned, well, March immediately stands out. We can see below the plan performance here. We need to understand what is going on here. And this is like super intuitive. And what Bill
wait, I just have to sound like the old man that I am. I understand that today, when you have a computer system, those two indicators that appear on the left and right hand side, when you hover over them, that drives old people like me crazy, because we don't see those tools are there and we never think to hover, right? And I had been using Zebra BI for a couple of weeks, and then when I was watching Tine and he hit that icon that I couldn't ever see, I'm like, what? There's more charts back here. So, if you're in Power BI, you probably already understand that. But for the people who are just coming from Excel, knowing that those extra 4 charts or extra 3 charts behind the scenes are there on the arrow that isn't there until you hover over where it's not.
Very good point. And thanks for highlighting this one. This is kind of a different experience that maybe we are used to seeing it in Excel. However, I think it's super intuitive once you start using it. The only thing, yeah, it's good for someone to show it maybe at first. So yeah, this is what we are doing right now. But maybe another feature that it's, I would say, more advanced than what we are used to is also the responsive layout. So if I start making this chart a bit smaller, the layout will be automatically adjusted. So since we don't have that much space, this will get a bit smaller, okay? And if I make it really smaller, now I have just this so-called integrated variance chart. But this one, I think it's still much better than what typical visualizations would look like, because I have variance incorporated automatically, meaning for every single month, I can immediately see whether or not we are performing below or above the plan, which is crucial, especially in financial reporting or performance reporting in general.
Okay, let me ask you a question. That's awesome that when you resize, you get just one element. But what if the element that I wanted was the one in the middle or the one at the top? Is there some control where I can say, oh, okay, you think that's the most important, but I think the second one is most important? Can I choose what to show?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you go under the settings, you can, of course, control all those, let's say, layout related settings. And here under layout, I can actually switch between different options. So let's say you would just want to go with maybe just the variances. Can I go with absolute and relative? That's it. I just select this option, and now these are the only two charts that I want to show. So yes, absolutely, you can have control over that. However, by default, we always do use this responsive approach because I guess it's the most easiest to use.
That's definitely easy. But then if I need to dive in and change it, the settings are there. That's great. That's great. I love that.
Perfect. Now help me out with the comment of below the plan March performance. So I'm just gonna go into the table. It's super easy. You just go to the cell that you want to comment, and now we can just simply write the comment. Should I pay something random, or will you give me a help? So we have below the plan performance due to, what would be the reason here?
Yeah, Layla didn't post enough videos. I don't know, right?
Okay. That's a good one. Let's include some humor into our presentation. But the point is, we were able to came up with explanation, even though it's completely goofy. But we can just simply enter the comment, and what it will create on the visual is the so-called comment marker. So we can immediately see that something is going on here. And let me show you another option. So on the right, you will always have the so-called comment box option. And if you expand it, the comment will appear right next to the visual. And now you can immediately, combine the visual explanation along with some additional context. And this, I think, it's super powerful when creating the reports and you want to provide additional explanation, maybe to the senior management or the CFO, CEO, or anybody else, basically. If you provide additional context, this will make your reports much better.
Okay, let's add a second comment. So for February, we're way up, and that's because Oz got a new hat. Oz has a new hat. I want to see how those two comments appear. Like the first comment you added was for March, and now you're adding a second comment for February where the numbers automatically renumbered. That's beautiful. And then over in the comment box, both items are there. This automates the 1989 sticky note on the chart, by a factor, by just orders of magnitude. This is so much better.
I fully agree, and thanks for helping me out with some great examples.
And then boy, it would be so tempting, right? Now the Excel in me wants to kick in, and based on any slicers that we choose, have those comments automatically update. That would be amazing. Although certainly beyond the scope of this, but like an Excel craftsman is going to be able to customize those comments, all kinds of possibilities there. Now that we have the mechanism to get them to appear in the chart, right? That's just beautiful.
Yeah, perfect. Glad you love it. And just to quickly explain, for sure, we could also add dynamic to the comments so that it will incorporate filters and so on. However, I don't think we have enough time for this one today, but for sure, we do have enough time to show how to make this already good-looking report how to add a couple of dashboards elements as well. So in order to get more into the details, we can do a couple of different things. So since we're using pivot, yeah, sorry.
I said that's great. Let's see what you have.
So since we are using pivot tables as a data source, that means that we can now incorporate all the out-of-the-box pivot table functionalities. So one of the features that I really like is ability to add slicers to the pivot tables. And what I'm going to do is just click on the channel, and this will create the slicer for the channels. Now, before I do some slicer fine-tunings, I'm going to do one little thing here. I'm just going to rename my pivot tables. This is something that, by the way, I would really recommend to do every time you're building a report. So this one will be pivot table presenter, and this one is going to be pivot table trends. This will, just make things easier for us. And now, when I click on the slicer, I actually have ability to control which pivot tables will this slicer filter. So it's kind of really similar to what we know from Power BI. I can just go under report connections. And now I have a couple of different pivot tables here. So I want this slicer to filter my pivot table presenter and pivot table trends. I'm going to click OK. Whoa, something happened on the right. We didn't expect that. Sorry, let me just quickly redesign this table. These things always happen when you go live. Sorry for that. So again, but let's take this as a demonstration how quickly you can set things up. So we just make this one a bit bigger. So let's put this to 1. Let's increase the font size. And now back to the report. If I click on those buttons, first, it automatically filters my pivot tables on the right. And then as a result, it also filters my Zebra BI visuals on the report. So now we have the button and we already have some kind of a dashboard experience. Now, filters can additionally be customized. I already have, this kind of a prepared. Maybe let's go with this one. And I'm just gonna do the right click on the visual. And I'm just gonna remove display header. And I want to show it in 2 columns. Okay, so now this looks really similar as, let's say, slicers in Power BI. And I'm going to add this one right here. And now I can simply switch between LinkedIn and YouTube performance. Okay, and again, if you just quickly see, well, LinkedIn performance is kind of worse than YouTube. So we see more green color here, whereas red color. But the idea is now I can start drilling into the data. We want to add one additional things here. We also want to add maybe a drop-down menu where we can select which presenters do we want to analyze. So for that, I'm just going to do one really simple trick. I'm just going to copy-paste this pivot table. And I'm going to remove all the fields. So I'm just going to add presenters to the filter, and I'm going to remove anything else. So now I have really basic table, a pivot table actually. Now, let's just move this one and add it at the beginning of the report. Okay, let's add it here for now. Now, I'm going to do a little trick that I know that you, Bill, liked very much the first time I showed it to you. But essentially, what we want to create here is a drop-down list for our presenters. So this is now still a pivot table. The only difference that we did, we just added, so on the left-hand side of the report. And now I want to do the following. If I click on this button, I can see all the presenters, which is what I want. This is the drop-down menu. And then I'm just gonna, again, slightly change the design so that I don't have any borders and backgrounds and so on. And I'm just gonna use this cell and write a simple if statement. Bill, you can check if I'm doing everything right, but essentially what I want to do the following. So if selection is equal to all, then give me a text that would say select presenter. If I select anyone from the list, like you, for example, then just give me the name of the selection.
Okay, yep.
But again, let's just write a simple if statement. So if value of this cell is equal to, we have to use the quotes. So all, if that's true, then give me, again, text, select presenter, else, just give me the value of the cell. So really simple if statement. Let's press enter. Everything okay, Bill? Or did I miss anything?
Yep.
Okay, we have select the presenter, which is what we want. Maybe let's remove the background color. And look what I'm going to do next. I'm just going to hide this row. And I'm going to make this one much smaller so that I will only see a button.
Look at that. Now wait, I have to tell everyone, when I first saw this, when you were demoing, the thing that caught my eye was how that dropped down. What is that drop down? Like, what is that? And when you opened it up, I couldn't figure out what kind of a control it was. It wasn't ActiveX. Like, what is this? And that is a 2-cell pivot table with half the cells hidden. To be able to choose from the list, it just blew me away. One of my favorite teenage tricks of all time.
Yeah, I mean, but the cool thing is it's nothing special. It's just pivot table. Nothing. It's not a rocket science. You just use existing pivot table, and you have now a drop-down menu, which makes a lot of sense because if I would create a filter, if I would create a slicer for that, it would be huge, right? It has a lot of values, and it would, I guess, it would not look cool on the report, and it would consume a lot of space, which is something that you typically do not want to do. Now, one thing we need to finalize here is, make it actionable in the sense that it will filter the data. So again, for that, we're going to use slicers. And since this is a pivot table, we can again simply insert a slicer. This time, I'm going to go with presenters because this is the dimension that we want to use for slicing. Oh, one more thing we need to do. So we need to do right-click on the pivot table and select this deselect auto fit column width on the update. For some reason, this is always by default. Personally, I don't like this. Do you perhaps know, is there a way how to disable this one by default?
Yes, there is.
Oh, settings, I'm guessing in.
Yeah, so it's easy. Go to File and then all the way down to Options. It'll take 1 minute. File all the way down to Options.
Perfect. So we have Options.
Very bottom. The data category on the left-hand side, third one down.
Perfect.
Top button, Edit Default Layout in the center. Right there. Go to Options just below, at the bottom right, click Pivot Table Options.
Okay. Oh,
and then turn it off there, and it will never be turned on again for you.
Whoa, amazing. Thanks for that. I mean, this was really painful for me, but I didn't check it out in details. So thanks a lot for clarifying this. But back to the case that I want to show at the beginning. So this selection will also push the selection to my slicer. And now what I can do next is to decide what this slicer will do. Again, let's go to the report connection, and I want this slicer to actually filter my pivot trends table, which is the data source for the chart, but not my presenter table. Okay, so this will be okay. I'm going to select okay, and now let's check out how our report looks like. By the way, all the data that we added here, we can just simply collapse it and just go with the report. Okay, so slicers, I think, cannot be hidden with columns, but we can always add them to the second row. But now, okay, this is now our dashboard. We have full one-page report, so I can switch between different presenters. This will filter out the data on the right. It will keep everything organized in my table, and now I can start, exploring my data. So first, by default, I have everything organized based on the number of views. So I can see that, well, actually, Oz is generating the most views on both platforms. We have Layla on the second place. We have Bill on the third. By the way, if I want to highlight a certain elements, I can simply just do that. Let's make Bill slightly more bluish.
Wow.
Okay, so now you can immediately see how you're performing towards other Excel influencers. And what I can also do is switch between different visualization. Maybe in this case, we should go with comparison to plan so that I can see what is our actual data and plan. And then I can apply sorting on different columns as well. So if I want to see who had the most ambitious plan, I can just simply apply sorting here. And again, we have Oz on the top. So yeah, Oz had really high plans for the previous year. And what is perhaps the most important is we can do exactly the same thing also on the variance. So if you want to see who is performing the best, we can just simply apply sorting and have, well, actually we have Chengdu at the top. Okay, so Chengdu did not have like a huge plan, but it performed above the plan. So in terms of sheer performance, his was the best. We have, okay, we have Alan on the second place. Again, we have UPIL on the third. And then at the bottom, you can also see, which one did not perform well. And now, typically in reporting, maybe you want to focus more on that. I know it kind of sounds a bit harsh, but you want to focus on the elements that are not performing as well as expected. So, just apply a sorting, and now we can see where the performance is the worst. And this is now, again, a clear indication that we need to do some action here. Okay, so we have random Bob, we have Marcel Excel on the second, but the point I'm trying to make, it's really actionable. You just do a click and then you immediately see what you need to see in those particular cases. Now, maybe one more thing, if I want to understand now, okay, Bill is performing above the plan, so let's check what is going on here. We just simply select Bill. And now on the chart, we can see, well, I don't know, Bill, would you maybe explain the data on the right?
Yeah, so no, it's all random. I don't know. Right? It looks like February, March, April was great compared to plan. January and May, I must have just been on vacation or something. Yeah, slacking.
Like and the point is, you immediately see what is going on because the right colors are being used, because you have dedicated series for showing what is really important, and these are all the key elements of actionable reporting. Now, since we are running low on time, maybe just additional maybe approach to all of that. What if we want to show the whole picture just on one visual? I guess this sounds ambitious, but let me show you how easy it is to create that with ZebraBI visuals and by using the so-called small multiples. So again, on the right, I already have predefined table, nothing special. We just have months in our rows, then we have presenters in columns, and we have our actuals and plan. So again, I'm just going to click on this table, and I'm going to select Insert ZebraBI Charts. Now, this is what has been basically created in a few seconds. Let's maybe expand this a bit. And now we have actually a dedicated chart for every single of the presenters. Now I could go with scroll option, but the point is now I can see the big picture, how everyone is performing, how does this stack up if we look all together, and so on. I'm going to do a few adjustments here. So again, let me just go back to the settings. So I'm just going to make text a bit smaller, and I'm also gonna fine-tune my categories in a way that I will get 3-column layout. So I just need to decrease this number a bit. Let's go with this is kind of the layout that I want. Okay, so now
this is small multiples, right? Which is something we don't have in Excel. I know they have it in Power BI.
Yeah.
And the whole key to this was you had an extra field in the pivot table, right? That's what triggered this small multiple. Is that?
Yeah, that's correct. This table is really similar to one that we had before. So before we had our months and actuals and plan, and we just added presenters. And as soon as we do that, this will create small multiples. So it's super easy and yet super powerful. As you mentioned, now you can see everything kind of on one page. And in order to do that, we can just maybe adjust the layout. Again, this is super easy. We can just decrease the size for each visual. Okay, now we have everything on one page. And all the things I mentioned before, you can still, switch between different layouts. So now we have advanced chart for every single presenter. We can see how they are performing compared to plan. And we also have, for example, scaling in place. So if we compare, for example, Oz, who had the highest views, to maybe random Bob, we can see that this chart is bigger because it generates more view. And this is scaling. This is really important, and it's included out of the box with everything you create with ZebraBI visuals.
That's great. Now, I have to ask. I mean, there's the paid version and a free version. Everything you've done today, like including these small multiples, we have to upgrade to the paid version, right? For that?
No, it's actually all of that is available in the free version. You can just simply within Excel go to App Source, insert the visuals, and start building things like that. Of course, there are a couple of small, let's say, limitations that for example, you have limited amount of comments that you can add and stuff like that. But a lot of advanced features that I showed right here, is supported in the free version. So if anybody wants to try it out, it's really easy. I'm going to show you in a second how to do that. But yeah, as mentioned, a lot of things are supported in the free version. And maybe just one last thing with small multiples, if I want to check out how you, Bill, are doing, I could just simply click on your name and then see your performance in kind of a pop-up window with all the additional details that would help me understand what is going on with your performance in a more clear and concise way. So again, I think super powerful approach, especially to showing trends and things like that. Now, before we go to the Q&A, just maybe a couple of different options you can do. You can create really advanced waterfall chart. Bill, you mentioned these are your favorite ones, but here I have a couple of examples. So you can add comments. You can also incorporate IBCS notations. I haven't mentioned IBCS a lot today, but essentially these are international business communication standards, how to present information in the right way. Super useful thing when designing the reports. It is out of the box included in Zebra BI visuals, but in any case, I would highly recommend to follow those standards when designing a data visualization. Then we can also create reports and dashboards. So maybe let me show you this example. This is a really powerful dashboard. So here I have a couple of tricks that I showed before. So I can switch between different years. I can switch between different months. I can go from one KPI to another. I can select region, customers. Here I have different time calculations, trends, tables where we focus just on the outliers. So a lot of really powerful stuff you can do. And also for any kinds of performance reporting or financial reporting, it's again super powerful. Here I have an example of a P&L report. By the way, finance, I think, are really, first of all, really important, but then kind of hard to do in the sense of creating really actionable reports. So here we have a couple of cool things like waterfall charts on the tables as well. By the way, this is not a chart, this is actually a table. And then you can also control things like cost elements. You can simply invert them on the fly on the visual. On the tables, by the way, you can switch between two different layouts. So this one is more, let's say, based on numbers, and this one includes a lot of visualizations. This is also something you can do on the tables. But since we are running out of time, all in all, a lot of different things you can do, and I would kind of invite you to try it out on your own. You can visit our website. You can, of course, as I mentioned, just simply go under Get My Add-ins, go to App Source, just type in Zebra, and you will have the visuals there. You can simply import and start building the reports. On our website, you will also find a lot of different report templates that you can use in order to speed up the process of creating new reports, because you can just simply replace the dummy data with your own, and the report is basically prepared. And I haven't mentioned that we also, of course, have products for PowerPoint as well, and of course for Power BI. So if you are, creating reports in different platforms, make sure to try them out as well. And finally, before we go to the Q&A, I would also highly recommend to check any of the stuff that Bill does, either on his official website, which is mrexcel.com, or on his YouTube channel, so at Mr. Excel. And Bill, I also saw information that you wrote over 60 books. Is that correct?
That's right. Yeah, I'm an expert at copy and paste. Take last year's book, copy it, paste it, change a few things. It's a new book.
Okay, I mean, regardless, this is an amazing achievement. Even like reading 60 books would be amazing, let alone writing it. So congrats on that. And of course, check out his YouTube channel. There's so many videos, really helpful one. And I guess I speak on behalf of everyone from Excel community when I say that we really appreciate your work. You're a really valuable member to community, and yeah, please keep up the good work. Hopefully, you're not planning to stop anytime soon, right?
I'm not planning on stopping anytime soon. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. This is what I wanted to hear.
Right.
Okay, this was super fun. I know we were a bit longer than originally expected, but yeah, I think we still have a couple of minutes for the Q&A. So if anybody, has any questions for Bill or for me, or I don't know, a question in general, feel free to either, I don't know, join on the stage or post your question in the chat.
Tine, the thing that I find most Excel people have never done is never gone to the insert tab and looked at that get add-ins. There's all kinds of great free stuff there. These aren't the old add-ins back from the old days, right? So it's just there on the insert tab. Check it out. Some good free things, and to find you just with Zebra there, and your 2 add-ins will come right up to the top.
Yeah, and this is a really good point, and this is one of the key elements of the so-called modern Excel, right? You can just simply incorporate additional stuff in it and open, variety of new possibilities you can do in Excel. So this is something that is great. So Microsoft, congrats on that. And yeah, you can find all, tons of different stuff here. But as mentioned before, yeah, if you want to check out Zebra BI Visuals, just simply type in Zebra and that's it. I see that Mark has also joined. Hello, Mark.
Yes, maybe. Hello, Bill. Hello, Tine.
Hey, Mark.
Excellent presentation and discussion. And I just wanted to let you know there was a really interesting question regarding the conditional coloring of filtering. So when you select a value in the filter, is it possible to color the Zebra BI chart or graph or some kind of element based on the filter condition?
Yeah, I mean, this is a good one. So if I understood correctly, the case would be, now let's say we would set this. So if I select Bill, this would be blue. If I would select, I don't know, our fellow Slovenian, Gaspar Kamenšek, then this would be maybe orange. Yeah, this is a really good point, and I guess makes a lot of sense. Mike, correct me if I'm wrong. At the moment, I think this is not supported in the way that we would be able to control that dynamically. This is kind of this goes back to Power BI, where we have similar questions and requirements, or let's say proposals, but at least for Power BI, this is not yet supported by Power BI for custom visuals. And since we are using more or less the same code, then this is also reflected in Excel. So long story short, at the moment, I don't think there's an option for that, but for sure it makes sense. So we will try to support this in the near future.
Yes, excellent. Well, in any case, if you have further recommendations or questions regarding the Zebra BI, I think that Tine and will be glad to answer. Also, if you have, let's say, certain questions, you can always write to support@zebrabi.com, and we'll try to answer that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, all I can say at the end is that, yeah, I mean, Bill, this was super fun, at least from me.
Yep.
Great session.
Thanks for inviting me.
Again, on behalf of Zebra BI team, a big thank you for taking the time and stopping by. Your inputs, are very valuable, and thanks for sharing it with us.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was great. Thanks for letting me share the stage. And Zebra BI is just a great tool. Even the free version, you can get some great insights. So.
Thanks, Bill. Much appreciated. And to all those of you attending today's session, hopefully this was interesting. Hopefully this was fun. Yeah, please enjoy the rest of Excel Global Summit, and hopefully, yeah, we'll see each other again soon. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.